Hello and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being covered in the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined this week again by Thad Greenson, news editor, and Jennifer Fumiko-Cahill, arts and features editor at the North Coast Journal. Welcome to you both.
Hey Dave, how you doing?
Pretty good. Hope things are well with you guys too. I can't believe that the first quarter of the year is already behind us and it's April. Hopefully no one got you guys with April Fool's jokes. I got unfortunately blindsided by a couple, but it's all in good fun.
I skated through unscathed somehow.
Yeah, I don't know why that's still a thing, but people are into it. Well, speaking of into it, let's get into the North Coast Journal. Thad, why don't you tell us what's on the cover this week?
Yeah, Dave, we this week we have a kind of a dual cover. It's our special, one of our special promotion weeks. So this week is Taco Week, which nice. Jen, I think, will fill you in on all the details shortly. But then we have a cover story that is looking at the story of Jeff Woodke, who was the Arcata First Baptist Church missionary who was held hostage in Niger, or in Western Africa, I should say. There's some uncertainty about exactly where he was being held, but was held for 6.5 years almost, and until his release on March 20th. And so we've written a couple of short stories about his release, and then he kind of made his first public remarks about his time being held captive by an Al-Qaeda group at a press conference on Friday, and then he addressed his church congregation on Sunday. So we did a cover story kind of diving into both his remarks about his experience, but then I really wanted to dig into the missionary work he was doing there in Niger, and had really dedicated most of his life to doing.
So, I read through this, and it's absolutely incredible story. All the details are just, it floods you with empathy and compassion for the situation that he found himself in, but also like immense amounts of respect and gratitude that there are people like him out there doing this work. So I highly recommend folks check it out. But kind of starting at the beginning, the fact that, this article, the way it's framed, is you spoke with several people about him and his experiences. Less so words that he gave at the church. Basically, that seems that makes sense. That you described it to me as he wanted to control his story. Can you tell us a little bit about that aspect of it?
Yeah. So. When they called this press conference, a person who had been working with his family throughout his time in captivity, kind of as a spokesperson for the family, they issued a really brief statement just kind of saying that the family was really happy to be reunited in San Francisco after he was released and kind of cleared some medical procedures and got back stateside. And then once he got back to McKinleyville, they sent out a release saying, that the family was going to hold this press conference and he was going to give really limited remarks, prepared remarks. And initially, they said that no questions were to be asked, that he was just kind of going to deliver his prepared statement and then go. And then once we got there, they said, well, maybe he'll feel up to taking, a couple questions, but kind of urged the reporters there to be just really sensitive of both that there are certain things he can't talk about. There are ongoing investigations into the people who held him, the circumstances of his kidnapping and his ransom, the ransom demands of the organization that held him. And then also there are 7 other foreign national hostages in that same region that may be held by affiliated groups or not. And so there's a really concerted effort and a hope that that information Jeff is providing to authorities will aid in the release of those other people. And so kind of out of fear of jeopardizing any of those efforts, there's certain things he doesn't want to talk about or can't talk about. And then also, I think, as most folks could understand, he described the circumstances of his living conditions for the last, 6.5 years as brutal and inhumane. Described having illnesses and injuries that weren't treated, so that he was, held in chains for 16 hours a day. Had a really limited contact with the outside world. He has been through a lot. And he opened up even more about that when speaking to his church congregation, which I think we might get to in a moment. But so the folks putting on the press conference just really also asked us to be respectful that there's things you might not be ready to talk about. And then they also kind of framed it saying, out of kind of deference to him and his family, like this is kind of going to be his one public remark or one time for him to make public remarks, and please don't make any attempts to contact the family and stuff like that. And so he talked, at that meeting a lot about his faith, what sustained him through his time in captivity, his release, and kind of some of the things he was going through, but it didn't really focus a lot on, and none of the questions focused on the work that he had done overseas, and which there had been limited information out about. In the articles that were out around the time of his capture, there's a couple paragraphs per story saying that, he had dedicated, decades of his life to aid work in the region or missionary work in the region, but none of them really that I found delved into kind of exactly what that work looked like and what he was doing. And so after, attending the press conference, I decided that was kind of an avenue I was really interested in exploring more. And so I reached out to a couple of people I knew to be affiliated with the church and close to the Woodkes, and kind of said, this is the framework of the story that I'm looking on. I really want to be respectful of them, and I don't want to call and pester Els and Jeff about, kind of talking to me about this, but are there other people who were really intimately familiar with this work that could talk about it? And I was set up with 4 people who all of whom had been on the ground in Niger working with Jeff and had some really unique insight into his work there, I think.
And you conveyed it like really well. I mean, it's there's so much in there. Like I said, I highly recommend people check it out. But the picture, the portrait, or whatever the metaphor is that you paint here, it's really fascinating work that he did there. And there was an evolution of the situation on the ground from over time, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us again, broad brushstrokes, because we're kind of doing an overview here, but what stood out to you in terms of that missionary work, or the situation on the ground, and his immense success in the evolution of the community where he lived there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are 3 key things that stood out to me that I hadn't really been aware of. And one of them was just the enormously complex forces, cultural and political forces on the ground in this region of Niger and in the Sahel region, and what those were doing to these various nomadic tribes that ended up being the focal point of Jeff's work. And so, there's a lot there, but the really short of it is these folks were being really struggling with changes that were coming with the 21st century. And so there's an increased desertification of the region, where more and more of the region was being turned from grasslands into desert. These are nomadic herds people who really depend on thriving grasslands to survive and subsist. There was increasing encroachment on their historical lands by farming developments and stuff like that. And with climate change, there's just increasingly severe droughts. And so he came to this region at a time when these people were really, really in crisis. And really, it seemed like over decades, methodically worked to address their needs. And so that's everything from helping them build traditional wells where they could have watering posts in their normal nomadic processions, and then helped invest when famine wiped out their herds, helped invest in a program, a cattle loan program essentially, which is kind of a pay it forward program where they would gift cows or goats or sheep to a certain family, and then when those had, under the promise that when those had offspring, those would be gifted to another family, and it would kind of under the same promise, and it would keep perpetuating, to forming like grain banks where they had helped families pool resources in order to buy grain and during the harvest season when it was its cheapest, and then store it and kind of dole it out over the course of the year so they wouldn't find themselves without when grain was at its highest prices. All the way to building schools. The government of Niger has a program where if a community meets certain criteria, including having a school building, working well, and some other things, then the government will send a teacher to live there and teach. And so helping some of these nomadic groups kind of fulfill that criteria and fill out the paperwork to get it to the government, and so they could have a teacher and an educational system. So just the scope of his work was really broader than I had any appreciation for prior. And then, the second thing that I realized is that he really became kind of, I think in the story I referred to as like the tip of the spear of this really large effort. A lot of it coming through the Arcata First Baptist Church to put missionary aid workers on the ground in Niger, and none of that would have happened without Jeff. Being kind of just the fierce advocate for these programs and these people. And then while he was getting kind of a workforce, at least a foreign missionary workforce largely from Humboldt County and Arcata, he also was leveraging kind of international granting organizations to fund this work. And so he really, kind of single-handedly, it seems, brought just a ton of resources to bear on this region. And, one of the people I talked to who spent some years there with him on the ground was that, it's not an exaggeration at all to say that, there are thousands and thousands of people alive today that would not have been had Jeff not done this work. So, yeah, really kind of profound in scope. And then, I spoke to somebody, Thomas Rickstrew, who I thought had a really unique insight into Jeff and worked with him there for a long time. And, one of the points that he made that really resonated with me is that when most of us kind of picture missionary work or the stereotypical missionary, goes and kind of plants a flag, builds a church, and then tries to proselytize and get people to convert and come into the church and hear the word of their God. And, Thomas said that that's not at all the way Jeff approached his work, that his was I forget exactly how Thomas framed it, but I think it was a gospel of hands and feet. And it was really about doing the work and providing for people and helping people. And Jeff's outlook was that if you do that well enough, people will look at you and say, like, why are you doing this? What motivates you to help us? And then that's his opportunity to share what motivates his work with the hope that, that will resonate with people. And I just thought that was interesting.
Absolutely. And thank you for going through that. I mean, I got goosebumps, and I read this already, but it's still to hear it. It's pretty incredible. And each of those elements that you mentioned, there are others too, but that really is a great survey of sort of some of the things that he touched. I think one of the key, taking those things in combination that you just described, that leading by example, and really addressing things like desertification and access to water and migration routes and schools and bringing education in. One of the things you didn't mention, which is in there, which is pretty fascinating, is that he was able to just persuade the tribal elders to allow women to be included in the schools, just because he had these nicknames. You tell us a little bit about like the nickname part of it, and because I think that kind of they're related to a certain extent.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk just about how revered Jeff was in the region. A couple of people actually mentioned to me that there are lots of Nigerian babies named Jeff in this region near Abalak, where he did so much work. But yeah, a lot of people just talked about how because he had been there for so long. I mean, he arrived there in the early 90s, and his work continued until he was taken in 2016. So we're talking about over a couple decades. And he was just really immersed there, and he spoke 6 languages. He spoke the national language of French, but then also all the regional dialects and tribal dialects. And so he was referred to, as Big Fish, royalty. I can't remember exactly what the others were.
Chief was another one.
Yeah. And people talked about going to to regional festivals with him, and that there would be this he would have seats of honor kind of set up for him, and there's just this reverence to him because, well, as one person described it to me, is that kind of so much in especially this really rural region of Niger, so much of the government services are kind of corrupt and or indifferent, and that Jeff was just somebody who not only got things done but so clearly clearly cared, and went out of his way to care, that that held a lot of cachet with a lot of people. And so when the man who helped build a school that allowed a teacher to come teach the youth of these people's tribes said, it needs to be open to girls too. That resonated, and he was able to, I'm sure he was very persuasive in other ways too, but that held a certain cachet that made it so that girls could attend the school too.
Yeah, pretty incredible. And there's so much more, but unfortunately, I think we don't have much more time here on this today. Like I said, I strongly encourage people to check it out, and I thank you immensely for the education and insights and the way you presented it. I'll just share one quick quote at the end of your article, not to like ruin the ending for people, but the person you spoke with, Rick. Yeah, sorry guys. Rick Shaw, it says, the reality of what he endured is just so heavy. If you could give me one person in life that I know who could be captured and held in captivity by Al-Qaeda and be strong in his faith and would stand for Christ, Jeff Woodke, he's the one. And then Jeff says, God bent the will of nations and the powerful to bring me, a lowly sinner, basically from a living hell. And he's home now. So we're real thankful for that too, of course. And thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Real quick before I turn it over to Jen, I just want to add one thing, which is that Els Woodke, his wife, is an incredibly impressive figure in this story. At least leapt out to me as an incredibly impressive figure, and just kind of had kind of an unwavering faith that Jeff would come home, and continued to advocate for him for 6.5 years in some really kind of complex geopolitical forces and tug of wars over his fate. And so I just really wanted to mention that.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Thad. And we'll continue to, hopefully people will check it out, and we'll learn more as the time in time, we'll learn more. How about you, Jen? What is going on the Arts and Features beat? I know Thad kind of led a little bit, but you're going to fill us in.
Yes, while Thad is talking to people who've been held prisoner for years on end and struggled with their faith and survival, I've got tacos. That's how it always works out. A lighter and spicier note, it is Taco Week. And we haven't had Taco Week before. If you're like asking yourself, what does she mean Taco Week? I mean, like Burger Week, but with tacos.
Nice.
And we actually were scheduled to do that. Do you recall we were scheduled to have Taco Week pre-pandemic? And then the pandemic ate Taco Week.
Along with so many things.
Just as lockdown happened. So it took us years to get here, but we're here. And as the copy in the pullout in your North Coast Journal this week says, you have trained for this every Taco Tuesday of your life. There are, I want to say 19 tacos in 18 locations. And I believe in you. I believe in you, Dave. They are a varied bunch, but there are trends. Once again, pineapple. Burger Week saw a lot of pineapple last time, and there's more pineapple to come. There are pineapple salsas, fresh pineapple, grilled pineapple, and I think there's a roasted pineapple in here somewhere. There are fish tacos aplenty. This time there are two offerings of vegetarian tacos, one being jackfruit and the other one being meatless chorizo. And yeah, there are some standouts. There are some things that okay, so yes, the double A is in here. What do you think they're going to put on their tacos?
Beef. It's beef.
Yes, of course, it's steak. So it's a steak taco. An impressive contender, to me anyway, is Pupuseria San Miguel has a pupusa taco, which is a simple grass-fed carne asada, cilantro, onion, and salsa situation, but instead of a tortilla, it's pupusa.
Nice.
There's almost nothing you can't substitute a pupusa and you'd be sad, right? There are some, as I said, there are some fish tacos in here, grilled, fried, manzanilla kitchen, which I know, Dave, you love the manzanilla.
Yes, my boy David.
Right? They're doing surf and turf. So there's a fish side and a pastor side. So that's kind of exciting. Perhaps you've heard of Low and Slow Barbecue. over in Blue Lake, they have a pork belly burnt ends taco.
Oh my goodness.
Right? I feel like that's right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I feel like
How
that's
could it
worth
be
it.
wrong?
And how could it be wrong? Although I'm looking at the picture and I feel attacked by this amount of jalapenos.
Yeah.
I feel someone is triple dog daring me and I am not going to take the bait. Right? I'm not.
Maybe you will.
I might take the bait. The Logan Taco over at Los Giles Taqueria, one of my favorite taco trucks in Humboldt. It's a nice, simple taco, but with the cheese sandwiched between two tortillas. The two tortilla, can we stop and have a sidebar about tacos in general?
Sure.
The double tortilla of the taco is like one of humankind's excellent choices. We don't always make good calls, but whoever first said, this is going to take two tortillas, bless you.
Nice.
It allows for all kinds of engineering that we would have had to skip. The Redwood Curtain's Curtain Cook and Nook in the Eureka branch of Redwood Curtain has a chicken, and also that's where the jackfruit taco is, a Jamaican jerk jackfruit taco. So there's all kinds of things happening. Lochas in Fortuna, which is another fantastic place. I love Lochas because, for one thing, they moved into the big Chinese buffet place.
Oh.
And so the big Chinese fountain in the front, they just populated with those little Mexican figurines of animals all over it, and it's the best thing in the world. Try and go when there's a wait so you can hang out there. But there's lots of stuff, and I am very eager to see people, taking selfies with their tacos and whatnot, and taking part in the frenzy. Again, this is not something that editorial does. I only find out when we're doing some proofreading what's going to be in the tacos, and so we all just kind of, when the paper comes out, we gossip, and we obsess just like everybody else, plan our assault on the county and how we're going to navigate the taco eating. I think editorial is currently making some sort of a plan, as we do with Burger Week. It's not easy though, Dave.
Right. There's a lot there. There's a lot.
There's a lot. Also stuffed higher than a taco. This week we have a story in the Art Beat column from Tamar Burris, and it is a big old springtime fest over at the Redwood Arts Association. If you have a chance to go in there, this exhibit runs, I think, through end of the month, and it is the spring exhibition. So the spring exhibition is kind of all the members of the Redwood Arts Association put in work. Some of it is spring related, some of it is, it's not bound to that theme. In the paper, you'll see a couple of pieces. One of them is the spring winter,
Nice.
which is a lovely painting of like a young woman having a picnic by water. It's like very, very spring image, and that's by Elsie Mendez. And there's a beautiful Barry Love mixed media piece called The Gaze that won for Best Photography. And for our producer, I just want to point out to Matt that Adrian Worth won Best in Show with a painting of squash that is called Gregorian Chant. I know he loves a vegetable pun. So,
yeah.
In this piece, Tamar does a really great job talking about not only some of the renovations that have been taking place over at the gallery, and letting people in on the improved flow of the space, and different efforts by the volunteers, but also about some of the judging. The judging was done by Michelle Ohm, who is a graduate, by the way, of UC Santa Barbara's College of Creative Studies. Go Gauchos, my alma mater. And she talked about all the variety of the work from RAA artists, and it's really something. And if you get a chance, you should go see it. It's a really nice survey of the kind of art that people who love making stuff are doing around our county.
This is fantastic, Jen. You got a 1-2 punch here. Amazing.
Yeah.
Taco Week starts tomorrow and goes through the 16th. And according to the article from tomorrow, the art gallery exhibition goes through the 15th of April. So we have 2 weekends.
15th, yes.
Yep. So there's 2 weekends.
It's going to be busy.
Yeah.
You're going to be looking at all the art and looking at all the tacos in just like 10 days.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jen. This was great. And as always, we appreciate you and look forward to talking to you again soon. That is all the time we have, unfortunately, this week. So North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick one up, stay informed. Also available online 24/7, so you can check them out and get more information about what you heard here today. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you again, Jen and Thad. See you again soon, and take care till next time. Bye, guys.